Hello everyone, this is Andrew. Welcome to Keen on America.
On July 4th, 2026, America will be 250 years old. An anniversary that will, no doubt, be greeted with a mixture of celebration, contemplation, and resignation. In Keen on America, Andrew talks not just about the American past and present, but also speculates on its future. What, Andrew asks, will be the 21st century fate of this now venerable American Republic?
Hello everybody. As we wind towards the end of the year, towards Oscar season in Hollywood, it's been a really nightmarish last quarter, or is appearing to be a nightmarish last quarter for Hollywood. Of the 25 movies, at least according to the New York Times, of the 25 serious Hollywood movies made in the last 3 months, 0 have been successful. Some were heavily marketed, many were championed by critics, most had star power, but they've all died. They include one of the worst films I've personally ever seen, called After the Hunt. I lasted about 30 minutes. A film about canceling culture, featuring a shamefully bad Julia Roberts. Also, Jennifer Lawrence's new film called Die My Love, which I saw this week, which I actually thought was rather good. The only film that seems to have been a little bit more successful is Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another, which has taken in $70 million after its 7 weeks of release. And it's considered, I think, one of the strong favorites for the upcoming Oscars. And we're going to talk film today with my old friend David Masciottra. He actually just wrote something about a Coen brother film, Honey Don't, which also died disastrously at the box office, although also critically got panned, but he rather liked it. I actually admit I rather liked it too. So David, let's begin with One Battle After Another. But before we go there, what do you make of these commercial disasters? You're in the Chicago area, I'm in San Francisco. We're both still going to the movies. Doesn't seem as if anybody else is.
Yeah, it's fascinating. For a long time, movies provided the lingua franca of American culture. They were something everyone could discuss. This is anecdotal, but it's an anecdote that the Times confirms in that story that you reference. Last year, around this time, I was teaching a course on horror literature, and I asked my students if any of them were planning on seeing Nosferatu, Robert Eggers' remake of the vampire classic. Not one had even heard of it. And this movie was marketed all over the place. Then Deja Vu, about a month ago, after I saw One Battle After Another, I brought that movie up to my students. These are undergraduate students, I should say, so between the ages of 18 and 22. And none of them had heard of One Battle After Another. So it appears as if the younger generation is entirely detached from the culture of cinema and the experience of cinema. And undoubtedly, that is partially responsible for Hollywood's misfortunes.
Yeah, and in an odd way, Hollywood's paying Gen Zers back. There was an interesting piece a couple of weeks ago from the New York Times about how today's top Hollywood directors have some issues with Gen Z. The only Gen Zer to come out of the films looking vaguely decent, I thought, was the daughter in One Battle After Another. Is there a generational issue here, David? I mean, we can talk anecdotally. My kids still go to the movies, so not all Gen Zers are refusing to go. It's, of course, expensive, and things on the economic front don't seem to be great for Gen Zers at the end of 2025, but there must be some young people still going to the movies.
Oh, yeah, of course. I'm just giving the broad strokes, but yeah, there are many who still have an interest. But among those who do, many of them, and this applies to adult Americans, if we can call them that, they don't see the movies that we're going to discuss today, but they go for these superhero films, which Martin Scorsese likened to amusement park rides. And it reminds me of, and there's a similar effect in publishing. There's a similar effect with music. It reminds me of something Gore Vidal said about maybe 20 years before he died, that the only thing succeeding were these brand names. So he said,
now we're beginning to sound like old cultural conservative farts, David, that somehow, when no one's reading anymore, no one's going to serious movies anymore, no one's listening to decent music, everyone's on TikTok or reading the National Enquirer. This is not a new theme. And I think one of the reasons why One Battle After Another is so interesting, it's taken in 70 million, but it's based on one of the less accessible American writers, Thomas Pynchon's Vineland. You're a postmodernist when it comes to literature. You've written all sorts of interesting books on this subject. How can One Battle After Another, which has taken in $60 million and is based on Vineland, why is that successful, whereas all these other films are failing?
Well, I think that One Battle After Another had an ability to resonate with the political discourse, which is so dominant now of society. 20, 30 years ago, people could be very much detached from political debate. In fact, most were, and still take in arts and entertainment. But now the political discourse is, it's like an octopus, and its tentacles reach into everything. And One Battle After Another was both celebrated as a movie of protest and resistance. That's partially true. And then also ridiculed on the right as, a woke, radical Marxist love letter.
But these people aren't going, I mean, the MAGA crowd, I don't think are flooding to see this. It seems...
No. But what I'm saying is that was a means of the film acquiring more attention than something like Nosferatu or something like Honey Don't, that just lives in this niche world of cinema. One Battle After Another broke into the political discourse, which is everywhere on social media.
I wonder whether there's a gendered quality here too. One Battle After Another was dominated, I think, by two men and one woman, or maybe a couple of women. DiCaprio, of course, who appears as a completely ludicrous leftover of the 60s, and Benicio del Toro, who appears a much more heroic figure in resisting a MAGA-style police force who were collecting up migrants. Is there a gendered quality? And then just to add to that, there is this young woman, a Gen Z woman, the daughter of the terrorist, the woman called Chase Infinity, who I thought did an excellent job in portraying a rather cynical, detached Gen Z.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Chase Infinity, if she doesn't have a big career, then there's certainly no justice in Hollywood. And you left out Sean Penn, who's one of the most renowned.
Yeah, I forgot about Penn, who was also brilliant in it, and
yes, he was.
Is in the running for an Oscar. But coming back to this issue of gender, we expect the main Hollywood men to be heroic and masculine, and DiCaprio is the complete reverse.
I thought he was hilarious in it and really effective, but then also poignant when necessary, especially at the film's conclusion. But what you're getting into is a bit of an old story. There's statistical evidence that, Hollywood tends to make a majority of movies about men in leading roles, and men often won't go see movies with women in the leading roles. So the gendered aspect is advantageous to movies with a male-dominated cast. And that's a problem that many feminist critics have lamented for a long time. Of course, I agree that it's a problem, but I'm not sure what to do about it if guys simply aren't going to see these movies.
Yeah, and you're coming up with an explanation maybe for Hollywood of why these films have been a failure. I was really struck with Jennifer Lawrence's role in Die My Love, but that was another film that's bombed at the box office. And another film that I've seen recently that I thought was excellent was a film called Begonia, featuring a very, very strong Emma Stone, which is a cultish film, hasn't done particularly well. But it seems as if characters like Stone and Lawrence are now the strongest actors in Hollywood. I mean, male or female. I mean, they're so assertive, they're so confident, they're so complex that men, for better or worse, are not keeping up. It might be part of our crisis of maleness, David.
I agree. I agree that the young actresses have completely outpaced their male counterparts in terms of charismatic screen presence and acting ability. Whereas,
can we go? Sorry to jump in here. Can we go beyond that? Because isn't Hollywood in many ways a mirror? It's just that these days probably women are a bit more interesting than men. I mean, I know that's a rather dangerous generalization, especially made between two males like you and I. But it's not just the portrayal, isn't it? A mirror, Hollywood, in many ways.
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's all this discussion right now about men are in crisis and boys are in crisis. And it's all rather boring. It's all rather pat. And that's because there's something about the old conception of masculinity that has become boring and predictable and droll. And that's why it's interesting. This is a bit afield of our topic, but these Scott Galloway types who are coming forward with all this advice on how to save young men, if you look at their work, they never suggest to young men that they consume anything by women. Don't watch movies.
Interesting, yeah. And Scott Galloway, I know him a little bit. Yeah, that's a really interesting observation. I hadn't thought of that. Scott Galloway is a very odd character. I know him. He's been on the show and I've socialized with him a little bit. He's a very awkward, weird guy. Again, a mirror of our crisis of masculinity. But yeah, that's a great point, David. And I bet that Scott Galloway isn't going to see Emma Stone or Jennifer Lawrence.
No, so I mean, they're saying men are lonely. They don't know how to connect with women, but they encourage men to occupy this gender segregated zone. And if they were to watch Emma Stone movies, watch Jennifer Lawrence movies, if they were to read women authors, listen to women singer-songwriters, it might demystify women and they could better understand and relate to them and enlarge their own worldview, sense of self, and sense of the world.
And more the males in these films. Jesse Plemons was in Begonia. I know he's not your favorite. I thought he was excellent in Begonia. But he is the classic insane conspiratorial type that seems to sit in everyone's basement these days on the internet, imagining alien invasions and all sorts of other odd things. So the men, and coming back to the DiCaprio figure, the only way that he was exemplary, the only way he showed any moral backbone or imagination was as a father.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and then it sets up that very. I won't spoil it in case your viewers haven't
Well, you
seen it,
can spoil it because anyone who hasn't seen it yet,
there's
I
a
feel.
very the DiCaprio character is delightfully goofy and absurd, and he provides a lot of comic relief because he's incompetent.
Very human, though. I mean,
Yes,
he's a.
yes, yeah, he's very very endearing. But then at the end, he has this wonderful gesture towards his daughter. And you're right, that's when he suddenly shifts into a more admirable and inspiring character. But it's interesting that even in one battle after another, the except for Benicio del Toro's character of Sensei, the men are continually boneheaded and bizarre and awkward in comparison to the women. The women are the ones who really have a sense of control and perspective.
Yeah, and not only that, but they're the ones being controlled by the women. So the Sean Penn character, who I forgot about,
Right.
who's dominant in the film, is completely controlled by another female character. He's obsessed with her, just
Yeah.
as in a very unhealthy, bizarre way. Whereas in a healthy way, DiCaprio is obsessed with his daughter. So the traditional gendered roles have been reversed.
Yes. Yeah, and in the movie that I wrote about, Honey Don't, Honey Don't is first and foremost it's kind of a detective comedy. But in that movie, our hero, Honey, played by Margaret Qualley,
and she's brilliant, I thought. And I thought that the reviews were very unfair, actually.
Terribly unfair, and she is brilliant, but she becomes this, feminist hero fighting against an idiotic patriarchy. But it's all so much fun. There's nothing didactic about it, and I thought that's why the movie was so enjoyable, and that Ethan Cohen and his wife Trisha Cook, who wrote the screenplay, were able to develop this political potency, but in a way that never lost its entertainment value. It's still a really fun and funny movie to watch. But
yeah,
here
and a very
again,
light movie, very entertaining. I would strongly suggest, although it was so minor and such a failure, it didn't even appear in the New York Times piece about the failure of the 25 movies. So God knows what that tells us about the economics. Before we went live, you said, well, they meant it as a B movie, which is fine. I mean, maybe Cohen can afford to do that, but why make a conscious B movie in today's culture? Either just put it up on Netflix or put it on YouTube, or don't bother.
That's an interesting point. One could say, if you want to make a B movie, just send it to one of these streaming services, because we don't have late night cable running movies any longer. But I think that, I don't know Ethan Cohen, but I think he meant that in the sense that it was an homage to the types of movies that featured, daring, wisecracking private eyes, stalking the streets of a downtrodden city, searching for criminals. And they said it's a lesbian B movie, and they made another one, Drive Away Dolls, which wasn't as good as Honey.
Yeah, I saw that one as well. Shows you and I, maybe our problem is we watch too many lesbian movies, David. we need to stop acknowledging this publicly. But yeah, I would strongly suggest people watch it. I thought it was beautifully made, brilliantly acted.
Maybe really, Aubrey
light,
the villain.
It's certainly something that could be watched on an airplane, for example.
And I like.
Sorry, go on.
I would just say I liked it as well, because it occupied this old familiar world of Raymond Chandler and film noir, but it did so in a way that felt fresh and innovative because of its setting of Bakersfield rather than Los Angeles or New York, and also its focus on, here we go again, lesbians, and its focus on sclerotic, idiotic, and hateful religious institutions, All of
Yeah, I
that
mean, I think
felt,
it wore its politics on its sleeve rather too overtly. I mean, you and I are probably in the same camp here. We were rather amused and entertained with its polemic against the church. I'm not sure. And I think that's why maybe One Battle After Another has been the one success of this genre, because whilst politically it's clearly anti-MAGA, it also makes fun of leftists, certainly 60s leftist radicals, doesn't it?
yeah, and it also makes fun of contemporary liberals because
Right.
there's a great scene where the DiCaprio character is essentially on the run for his life.
Yeah,
But
it's a brilliant scene.
yes, but someone from the organization on the phone is chiding him about his problematic language. And you know, there's metaphorical power there about we don't want to read too much into this because it's a fun movie, but there's some import there about often the lack of an ability to prioritize on the left.
And the language of the left, which, of course, After the Hunt, you and I, have you seen After the Hunt, David?
No,
You can't defend it if you haven't seen it.
no, I jokingly.
I haven't seen all of it. I only saw half an hour, and I very rarely walk out of movies. But my wife and I it was so bad. But that's another story. Before we get on to our final film, which is the one we actually disagree on, which might make this a little more interesting, a little edgier. Coming back, you've written about David Foster Wallace extensively. You may be writing a book about him. What about, now, I'm not suggesting that Foster Wallace and Pynchon are the same author, but they're writing about a similar sort of America in many ways, offering a similar critique. What about the Pynchon-esque quality? Was there one, or is it just sort of so liberally borrowed from Pynchon's Vineland that it wasn't really Pynchon?
It's pretty liberally borrowed. However, I would say that, you know, Pynchon was a hero of Wallace's and a major influence on Wallace. The Pynchon aspects, I would say, is the overt presentation of absurdity as somehow fundamental and foundational to the American experience. So the fact that, for example, the main villains are the Christmas Adventurers Club, and they're this, you know, white supremacist outfit and golf attire.
That's brilliant. There's a brilliant scene with white supremacists and apple pie in a suburban house. I won't ruin it for everyone, but it's brilliant.
And that kind of presentation of absurdity is not on the fringe, but central to Americana and American identity, is something that Pynchon excelled at, and that Wallace likewise excelled.
Yeah, it's a kind of hyper-realism that so many Europeans have also written about America. Although it's so often that's hard to bring to screen. The White Noise, the version of White Noise, DeLillo's great work, was a disaster on Netflix. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I did see it, and I thought it was awful. I was excited to watch it because it's one of my favorite contemporary novels. But
me too.
It was virtually unwatchable.
So too much agreement, David. You and I agree on everything, but we don't agree on Bruce Springsteen, the new movie about Bruce Springsteen called Deliver Me From Nowhere, featuring Jeremy Allen White. It's based on a book by Warren Zanes, Deliver Me From Nowhere. It's the making of the Nebraska movie. And actually, Zanes was on the show a few years ago, and I thought he was exceptionally interesting and articulate. You didn't like this movie at all, David. Did you walk out?
No, I didn't. We didn't walk out. And my wife liked it better than I did.
Which isn't saying much, given what you said about it.
Right. No, you know, Edgar Allan Poe wrote that the first and foremost obligation of the writer is to entertain. So my first criticism of Deliver Me From Nowhere, it may not be one of great depth, but it's that I found the movie very boring. And that's because, first of all, it selected a time in Springsteen's life in which he was in complete solitude. So, you know, they may have wanted to call it Deliver Me From the Notebook, because there were so many shots of an earnest Jeremy Allen White as Springsteen, staring at his notebook.
Yeah, the theory, the New York Times describes that as a fierce anxiety, which I think is a good description.
And then also the movie is so literal. I mean, we see the Springsteen character having a flashback to when his father drove him and his sister, who the movie doesn't even really acknowledge as existing, to a mansion in the countryside. And then we see Springsteen writing Mansion on the Hill. It was so literal and so dull that I don't feel it made for an interesting movie. Nebraska might make for an interesting story of art and Springsteen's creative genesis, but it doesn't make for an interesting movie when we have to watch somebody sit alone in a room so much.
I think that the book is better. I have to admit that the book was exceptional. Deliver Me from Nowhere. I don't always read all the books, the books by authors who appear on the show, but I gobbled that one up. I tell you why I liked it. Firstly, because I think there are two Bruce Springsteens, or maybe there's more than two, but there's the one before Born in the USA, the pre-global superstar Springsteen who played to hundreds of thousands of people in these huge stadiums. I got into Bruce Springsteen. I'm unfortunately, David, a little older than you. I'm aging myself, but I got in right from the beginning. I saw him in several times in 80, 81 in the UK. And this is the Springsteen of Ashbury Park, obviously of Born to Run, of Darkness on the Edge of Town. And this is the Springsteen that I like. I don't like the later Springsteen. And I think what this film does, maybe implicitly, and I think that in a way Zanes deals with this in the book, is that he recognizes that Bruce Springsteen kind of knew that he was about to become a mega star. And this is a film about the last months before he went global, which explains why he spent so much time alone and why he was so confused and weirdly miserable.
Yeah, well, the bargain was more overt and explicit than the movie depicts.
It was Fustian. We did a show on Dr. Faust recently, and this is about as overt a Faustian bargain as you can get.
Yeah, well, and I mean the literal bargain of John Landau, Springsteen's manager, flat out told the record company executives who were skeptical of Nebraska's commercial potential, if you let them put this record out, the next one's going to be huge. And
right, and that was the deal. Zanes really gets into that in the book. I mean, Landau sold Nebraska to the big label by saying, well, if you let us do Nebraska, we'll also give you Born in the USA, because these were two projects in parallel. So there were these two Springsteens sort of simultaneously jostling with one another.
Yes, and the thing that I found interesting about the movie, that the one thing I thought that it did very well, and this relates back to our conversation about gender.
And I wanted to bring it back to gender. You beat me to it.
Is that it showed Springsteen as a man of curiosity. He's reading Flannery O'Connor. He's watching interesting films like Badlands. He's in a library researching the serial killer Charles Starkweather. And even though Springsteen's become this avatar of traditional American masculinity, the film correctly depicts him as having an elevated sense of art and journalism. He has an active mind, and I think that that's an antidote to the dumb masculinity that many people preach now. And simultaneously, it gave a very good presentation of friendship between two men, even though I thought that the movie bizarrely...
You mean between the boy and the father?
No, between Springsteen and Landau.
Okay. I thought, yeah.
Even though the movie bizarrely neglects the E Street Band, I mean, it doesn't even
Yeah,
name
yeah, but coming back to your the gender conversation, the fierce anxiety that Springsteen articulated, maybe because of this disappearing masculinity, which is, of course, most fundamentally represented in his father, who was also deeply depressed, an alcoholic, a violent man, beat his son up, beat his wife up. So in a sort of broader sense, can we interpret, I mean, maybe we're over-interpreting this movie, but can we see this as a crisis of masculinity film? It is the kind of film that Scott Galloway would go to and probably rather enjoy, probably personalized.
Yeah, I do think you can read it that way, because there's the failed masculinity of Springsteen's father. And, we used to have a term for that, toxic masculinity, but then, it became so demonized, nobody uses it anymore. But it's this idea of masculinity as the bully, projecting one's power and imposing it over others, even those who are fundamentally weaker, like a child. And America has mythologized that form of masculinity. We have so much destructive nostalgia for the factory workers and the mill workers, when in reality, many of them were unhappy, perhaps not to the extent of Springsteen's mentally ill father, but many of them were unhappy with a great deal of problems. And then Bruce Springsteen, he has, both as a character in the film and from what I know about him, and I've written a book about his music, he has a different conception of masculinity, one that can express itself through artistic creativity and communication. And that's a much healthier model, but it's a model that is always cutting against the grain of the mainstream American culture.
Right, and it's too, I mean, the reality of Springsteen, which is probably why he's so universally popular, is that there are two Springsteens when it comes to maleness. There's the Nebraska sensitivity, the one that film's about, but also the Springsteen of Born in the USA, which was embraced by Reagan. I know that Springsteen wasn't thrilled with that. And it's also, who's the former New Jersey governor who's a big fan of Springsteen?
Chris Christie.
Yeah, Chris Christie is a huge fan. So the funny thing about Bruce is he has all these followers whose politics he absolutely loathes, but because I think there are two of them, there's Born in the USA and there's Nebraska.
Yeah, and Born in the USA, the song is one of the most infamously misinterpreted songs of all time. But even though the lyrics are pretty direct, Springsteen had to know what he was doing, posing in front of the American flag with his fist in the air. The aesthetics of it are triumphant. So this two Springsteen's point that you make is very interesting, especially when you consider that after Born in the USA, he released the record Tunnel of Love, which is much more the Nebraska Springsteen than the Born in the USA Springsteen, because it's, with the exception of a couple of songs like the title track, it's a quiet record about a marriage's dissolution. And that's something he was going through at the time. He wrote these songs when he was on the brink of divorce from his first wife. So he reverted back to that fierce anxiety Springsteen, that contemplative, introspective Springsteen, after he acquired that superstar status.
Yeah, and I wonder whether there's a little more to this, David, in the sense that maybe an artist can't fully recognize this. It's too painful. But you may disagree. I strongly believe this. I don't think Springsteen is a particularly great artist. I think he's a great figure and a great media construction, maybe a mythological figure in American history. I think after his first 4 albums, I don't think he's particularly great artist, certainly when compared to I don't know, Dylan or something. He hasn't. I mean, his early work is very good, but after that, he's been in free fall, all sorts of decline. So I wonder whether. I wonder whether, in terms of this film, in an odd way, maybe unconsciously, there's this recognition that he's almost giving up his art. It's this Faustian bargain. He can be rich and famous, but he's never going to make Born to Run again. It took him a year to make, and it almost drove everybody mad, including himself. And there are even references to that in that film. Nebraska is his last serious piece of intellectual work in many ways.
I largely agree with your assessment. I think he was a great artist in the 70s, and the music speaks for itself. But I don't think that he ever equaled as a songwriter. Dylan, Van Morrison, several others that we could name.
In that sense, it's an interesting comparison between the Springsteen movie and A Complete Unknown, the Dylan movie, which I thought was terrible. But that's another story as well. Go on.
He had flashes of brilliance after Nebraska. Certain songs, certain moments.
Yeah, I agree.
But there's an interesting anecdote that comes from Dave Marsh, the kind of official biographer of Springsteen, that they went to a Yankees game together a year or two after Born the USA's release, and they had to leave the game early because so many people were bothering them, asking Springsteen for autographs, pictures, and they're just in their seats trying to watch. And when they were leaving, Dave Marsh said to Springsteen, how does that not drive you insane? How do you not hate that? And Springsteen said, how could I hate it? It's what I've always wanted. So I think that.
Yeah, I don't know if he meant. I mean, there's a more complicated.
I'm sure there's more complicated to it, and I can't, based on an anecdote alone, psychoanalyze. But my point is that I think there's more of a mercurial aspect to Springsteen's career than most of his fans want to admit and acknowledge.
Yeah, so the film is in many ways sort of, he's on the brink of, it's from the artist to the celebrity, from the poet to something else. Anyway, finally on this, David, what about the female angle? Sorry, go on.
If I could just punctuate the point, if we take a look at somebody, whether you like his music or not, like Neil Young, who turned 80 yesterday, Neil Young consistently rejected the commercial world, even though he was part of it, whereas Springsteen did this kind of interesting dance with it. And I think it's because your thesis is correct, that there are two Springsteens. There's the pop star Springsteen, and then there's the introspective singer-songwriter.
Which is why I like the film, because it's the last gasp of the introspective singer-songwriter. Landau famously wrote about Springsteen that he's the future of rock and roll, and he may have been right, but it's not a particularly bright future. Finally, on this one, let's just come back to gender, because of course Bruce Springsteen is imagined, whether it's Jeremy Allen White or otherwise, as the male American hero. What does this film tell us, and his fierce anxiety about maleness? Of course, one of the other things that Zaines's book, Deliver Me From Nowhere, focuses on is Bruce Springsteen's mental health crisis and the breakdown he had, which is very vividly, explicitly portrayed at the end of the movie.
I think that, this, we won't go back to Galloway. I'll interrupt myself.
Yeah, we don't want to talk too much about Galloway.
Men There is truth, even though it's become a bit of a cliched criticism. There is a great deal of truth to the idea that men have too many hang-ups, and they're too insecure about maintaining a certain image.
Except you and I, David, of course.
Right. We're the enlightened men that
we're the Douglas Springsteens of the world.
And that, you know, much of what people used to call masculinity are just universal values and virtues. That's a question. Is there something uniquely virtuous about masculinity that women can't claim? And if there is, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. So men feeling insecure, trying to maintain some image that they've borrowed from other cultural signifiers, is the cause of a lot of anxiety, where if you would just get shut of that, you might find yourself feeling much happier and freer.
Yeah, and the end of the film was one of the more ludicrous moments of the Springsteen film, was when an adult Bruce sat on the lap of his father, which may somehow capture all the crisis of masculinity.
See, that was embarrassing to me. That was
embarrassing. I have to admit that was not the high point of the film. Anyway,
according to Springsteen's memoir, they had a
Did that really happen?
Well, the conversation happened, but he didn't sit on his lap.
Yeah, and he talks about that conversation in his Broadway show, which I also thought was exceptional, which is a sort of return to Bruce as the artist. And he says that happened just before the birth of his first child. So anyway, enough Bruce. Wonderful conversation, David. You and I perhaps even agree a little bit on Deliver Me From Nowhere, but you
make a good case for it, but I was still bored.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it was the most interesting of film, but for fans of a certain a nostalgia for Bruce that I have, a Bruce that now is lost or doesn't exist, I thought it was a good film. I
know you want to wrap it up and it's your show, but I think that the musical biopic genre overall is weak, and it seems like it's hard to make a good one. There are only a few that stand out to me as really strong films.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even include this one in it. There was hardly any music.
Right, and also it's more of a snapshot. It's not a biography. It focuses on 1 year period of his life.
Well, interesting, David. Maybe we'll do more shows on movies. We want more people to see it. So the only one I would strongly discourage people from seeing is After the Hunt, which is a catastrophe. But the Jennifer Lawrence film Die My Love is exceptional. If you want to see interesting stuff, still go to the cinema. What's your strong recommendation, David? I'm guessing it's Honey Don't. Yeah,
we'll go with that one because, as you noted, it was a commercial failure. Critics hated it, so it may have escaped the radar of many film goers, and that's unfortunate because it's a really fun and politically potent lesbian send-up to the world of Raymond Chandler and film noir.